Started. Good evening again. And I'm Marcie, for those of you that don't know me, but like I said, I think everybody here does. Hope you had a great week, and we're looking forward to our spotlight guest here shortly. We're going to get started. David is with us tonight, but not as monitor. So Jennifer's going to reach out and help us tonight. So Jennifer, you want to go ahead and start giving our rules and commands?
Oh, you think I have those up?
Yeah.
Get
ready. Let's go. So bear with us tonight, folks.
Yeah. Okay.
Very different station about the taste of death.
Hey, Linda.
Just to let everybody know that this is a facilitated peer support group.
Okay.
It's not a group therapy session. If you're
Between
experiencing
8:30 and 30 or my
off the bat, now you put a thing right over my screen. There we go. Please contact a licensed professional like our presenter tonight, or if it's a dire need, and call a suicide hotline. And that we do record this show, but just during the presentation, not during the Q&A.
Great. Yeah, and if you are here for the very first time, if you want to go ahead and leave your name and the state that you do reside in and give a shout out, that's great too. But we'll go ahead and get started. This evening's guest, we have Brooke Randolph, and Brooke will be sharing a little bit with us this evening with her presentation, and she's located in Indianapolis. Here, she's a regular attendee of the Indiana Adoption Network, and she's got a few books out. She's an adopted mom and a licensed therapist. And Brooke, I'm going to let you take it from here. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here and put up just a few slides, although I don't have a whole lot of presentation so much as, get to that. There it is. I want to have a discussion today.
Yay.
So actually, as I say that, I'm going to get my own paper because I may take notes of what some of you guys say. We'll see. We'll see. All right, so let's go through and see. Okay, so I knew I always introduce myself. You've probably seen these slides before. I'm Brooke Randolph, a licensed mental health counselor. I am licensed in Indiana and Massachusetts. I am a therapist, author, and speaker. And let's see if I can go through here. My primary specialty has always been adoption. These are some of the adoption conferences that I've spoken at, including obviously the Indiana Adoptee Network. This old slides I'm pulling up, but I also specialize in brain spotting. I don't think that's going to come into tonight's discussion, but I'm always happy to answer questions about that. And I kind of facilitate and lead the brain spotting with adoption group. So really my goal right now is to spread adoption competency within the brain spotting practitioners. So all the therapists around the world really, and really getting that adoption competency there. I am also owner and director of the Greenhouse, which is office and event space in Indianapolis and clearly closed currently. And I also run a group practice. So there's other therapists who work with me. All are trained in brain spotting. Lisa Floyd is an adoptee who also works with me and does a lot of adoption work also. And I am an adoptive mother in a semi-open international adoption. I mean, open, semi-open, it's all a vast continuum. This picture, I think he was 8 or 9, and he's 13 and built like the rugby player that he is, so bigger than he is in this adorable picture. But I invited him to join us, but he's has other things in mind for the evening, apparently. Okay, so I want to make a disclaimer that while this whole COVID thing kind of started out bringing people together, it's quickly become political, and I don't think that benefits our discussion tonight. So I'm going to just make the disclaimer that we're going to leave politics um, out of the discussion. And I also recognize we all have a bias. So this is your opportunity to kind of check your own bias and recognize where you're coming from and how that may not be shared with everyone else, and be just being aware of that as we discuss. Um, my bias, I was kind of taking notes earlier, is just, I live with two people who are immunocompromised. I know several people who currently do or have had COVID. And so to some of you, I may seem more conservative on this topic. But I'm also recognizing that that is my bias and that not everyone agrees. Okay, so have you heard of the 7 core adoption issues? I am all for anyone who wants to unmute themselves, um, or
Hey,
share any.
Brooke,
Yes.
your slides are not changing. We are still on the core connections, your first slide. So we missed the
Oh,
picture of your beautiful son.
Yeah, we
we
want to
missed.
see Will.
Okay,
Yeah,
then that's no good.
you
What
worked on these.
did
We,
that?
we need to see them.
Didn't work. Let's be honest here. Okay, let me see here. I'm gonna stop the share. It doesn't like to respond well. There we go. Maybe. Okay, let's try this again. That's funny because I have been doing this quite a bit. Can you
There we
see?
go.
Yay.
Funny. Okay, so this was the second slide. Those are books I helped work on or worked on. Old crazy stuff. Let's flash through. There's the adorable child who's now at least as big as I am. Um,
Don't see that one yet.
you don't see
We
it.
just see the books.
Yep.
Why sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to. This is okay. There is something that has been changed in my settings.
There's Will. I
And
saw him for a minute.
wait, now you see it? I'm so confused about that part. Except I have an idea. Um, check this little setting here. Okay. I mean, these slides are not really all that important. Grand scale. Okay. So
There
if
he
I hit
is.
play,
Aw,
you see the cute kid.
that's
Yes.
sweet.
You see the ugly COVID. Nope. The
Yep.
slide. Yes, you do see that, Jennifer? The
Yes, we've
slide.
got it.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. It's ugly. We don't want to see that anyway. All right. So, have you heard of the 7 core issues in adoption? Um, we could probably start a quick poll, but just feel free to type in the chat or share, unmute yourself. Is this something you've heard of, not heard of? Make sure the chat's up so I can see it, hopefully. All right. Well, we're going to go through them. These are obviously generalizations, but I'll tell you, this is the most popular page on my entire site. This is like blog. I don't even remember how many years ago that it still comes up as the most popular page. Everyone's looking for the 7 core emotional issues in adoption. And that's because there are trends and there are reasons that are trends and they play out differently for everyone. But what I really want us to be able to talk about tonight is how they how these are impacted by this current situation, and that there's lots of things that are impacting um, those of us who are impacted by adoption um, in different ways than maybe it is for other people. Okay? And you guys, I want you to be able to contribute to that. This isn't just about me telling, like, this is the way it is, because this is something that everyone experiences a little differently. I think it's a great conversation for us to have. Okay, and now what's happening? So this first one is fear. Right now I have the chat window right in front of my slide, so I can't see it, but I'm pretty sure it says fear.
Mhm.
Okay. Have you had some fear recently? And what are the things that you're afraid of related to COVID? The reason that fear is so powerful in adoption is that there were things that happened when you were completely out of control. For speaking to adoptees, um, which I know this room is not all adoptees, right? Um,
And
that
moms.
and moms. Sometimes there was a lot of control in that. That's right. Um, and that you don't know what was coming next. That not knowing that coming next leads to this fear. And then when the fear is um, not fully processed, and for some of it, it can't be yet. Um, then we get a situation where any fear is kind of exaggerated, not exaggerated, but multiplied based on all fears from the past. And so if you've had, um, you feel like you kind of have fear in general, then of course, when people are telling you there's this scary virus that's out there that's horrible to live through and potentially could kill you, that's scary. And I think that's scary for a lot of people. And if you've already had anxiety, then in general, because you have a history of things that have caused fear, then you're going to have that at an even bigger way. Anything to say about fear here, or that examples, questions, thoughts you have?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm great at conversations and people like throwing questions in at any time.
Well, I just got back from California. I flew from Virginia against my rational judgment with the COVID, but my birth dad was in ICU and they brought him home on Wednesday and he died on Friday. So we'd only been in reunion 15 months. So it's just been, he was in the hospital almost 3 weeks and nobody had been able to see him. So I was the one that like talked them into hospice. So it was just like a lot of weight on my feeling responsible to make sure everything works with them, because I'd gone through it with both my adopted parents and they had never done it before. So, but anyway, I was scared on the plane.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably felt that fear a lot more than you have felt other fears.
Right.
And I think that touches on another important thing, that one fear that's cropping up for people is, what if they die before we find them? What if they get this? Or what if we're never allowed to leave our house and we can't meet?
And I think, is Oliver on this call?
He was, yes.
Oliver is doing a reunion right now during this, so he
Oh,
can totally relate to that.
Oh, wow.
oh man, Oliver, are you here? You want to share some about that?
Let's see, where did he go? See if I can find him. I sent him a message. We'll see.
Well, that's fine.
I think that fear is
the COVID related fear around a reunion and people you're searching for passing before you find them is really an old fear that most people searching have before or when they are searching. It's just the COVID version of it, but it's the same old fear of finding a grave.
Yeah, that's true.
Do
I
you
think we always feared when we searched, you know?
it's the same fear, but it's magnified now?
It's magnified
Yeah,
more.
right.
That's one more thing.
I think that's why I searched so early, because I didn't want to take that chance.
And when you
I
say
was thinking about,
we're younger,
Yeah, I was younger.
I was thinking about when I searched for my son and I found him, not long after very shortly after we finally met, which took long enough, then he was in New Orleans and Katrina came. And so there was all that fear and trauma about that. And other things happened in his life and of course in mine too that were traumatic. And so it seems to me that there's already the trauma around. For me, the whole reunion brought so much renewed emotional upheaval, brought so much, everything surfaced that had been buried. And then you pile on top of that a traumatic event like this. And I just think it must be that a lot of people find what I did. It was hard enough to get through just the reunion, or at that point, the start of the reunion. And then something kind of really especially traumatic and unusual came up. And that just made it that much more. I'm wondering if that's true for other people.
so I would say yes, that is, but I think you'd probably appreciate hearing from other people to say, yeah, me too.
I'm interested in you too, Brooke. Go ahead.
You know, as I said, I'm an adopted parent. I have a different experience and have walked with so many people through all of this, but I never want to speak from like an experience that I don't have, and I'm also very careful not to share other people's stories too much. You know, for me right now, the fear, I'll be real honest, there was there's definitely anxiety around the illness, being with my parents and having them be immunocompromised, and you know, like that's frightening to me. But the biggest thing, the scariest thing for me is that we can't go anywhere. And not that we can't leave the house, it's that I have a now basically adult-sized, dark-skinned boy, and it's not safe right now. And I can't leave. And not everyone in the world really understands this perspective. I'm just don't know where everyone's coming from on this call. Usually my Jewish friends understand very clearly that for several years I've had an escape route. I've known how we could leave if we needed to. And it feels like the world is getting scarier and more dangerous, and we're stuck. So that's the fear for me, is how do I keep him safe? And you're right, it's magnified right now.
I think any parent must be really especially worried about keeping their children safe. And, you know, along those lines, I have 3 sons, the 2 I raised, and the one son I didn't raise, as I mentioned, is in New Orleans, and that's been a COVID hotspot. And, you know, the thought that he might catch this and I might lose him is just a horrifying thought, just horrifying. would be devastating to everyone who knows and loves him, and his children, but to me, because, you know, I lost him, I found him, and now the idea that I would lose any of my children, but it would just be a different thing, you know.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Now, Meredith commented that, yeah, that she says she can understand you, Brooke.
Yeah, I see that. I appreciate that, Meredith.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think that's an interesting cultural thing for people to just kind of notice, and that, um, you know, even lots of my own family who are in that, right? But they come from a very Christian perspective in a different world, and that, um, well, I'll just kind of add it, like, it's not just culture, um, but there is an epigenetic transfer of trauma that we see that is so clear. And that's why, people of Jewish heritage kind of get that, like, feeling like we need to have an escape route. And then that's also why I understand that not everyone does. And some people think I'm crazy, and that's okay too. You can think I'm crazy.
I don't think you're crazy. I'm Meredith. I totally understand it. And yeah, it's that intergenerational trauma. And one of the first things I thought when things were strictly locked down were I felt that immediate fear for my safety and resources, and like, is this going to be the last hot meal that I have, or is this going to be the last hot shower that I'm going to have where I feel safe? I know that might sound a little dramatic or extreme, but I really did have those thoughts, and then it led me to, oh my gosh, just that side of the family and the generations and some of the ancestors that I found on my family tree, and just the possible trauma that they maybe went through. So.
That you've heard from them or about them?
Well, it's my biological father's side, and I am I found out that my dad wasn't my dad. So I was mostly raised with my biological mother, but she struggled with drug addiction. So it's weird. Now I'm coming to the realization that my stepmom of my birth certificate father, but she was kind of more of a mother figure to me throughout my whole life. And so I haven't been talking and in any kind of contact with my mom since August of 2018. And then my biological father, I made contact with him 2 years ago on May 4th for the first time. And just on March 13th, I contacted his wife and told her that I exist because I was a secret love child. So he is currently not talking to me because of that. And I have 3 half siblings from their marriage that don't know I exist. And that's my next step in the puzzle, is to call them. But I'm waiting on one of their children's birthdays to pass. And then was going to maybe plan on calling them in the next week or so and just saying, hey, I've discovered this about my DNA, and I'm here. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us appreciate hearing the different stories and finding the pieces that we relate to. Is there any more that anyone would like to share about fear?
Linda's got her hand up. Linda, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, hi everyone. This is a fear that I had before. I'm in reunion with my son, going on 5 years. It's a fear that I've had before, made even worse now because of situation. But I don't have a relationship with his adopted family or his wife. So my fear is that I will not be notified if something were to happen to him. So I asked him about that. I finally got up the nerve a couple weeks ago to ask him, you know, to tell him that, and then to say, could you like maybe have like a friend of yours, a good friend who would be, the one that would let me know. And I don't know, he would just, this is kind of his way of dealing with stuff anyway, which I understand. He's kind of laughed it off as like, don't worry, people they'll find out somehow or whatever. My sense is he didn't really want to kind of go there with really the whole question and the thought of it. So, and I didn't press him at that point in time, but his wife won't contact me. His parents wouldn't have any way of contacting me. He finally said, your grandson. Now he's 11. I said, you're seriously going to leave this up to an 11-year-old or something like you really were going to happen to them? And he just kind of laughed it off. So I kind of dropped it at that point in time. But anyway, that's a real fear.
It is a real fear.
I wouldn't even know.
Yeah. And I think we find that there are times when our very valid fears run up against the lack of fear in another. And sometimes it's just a very strong denial because we can't face the idea, right? Like some people right now that I live with who really want to believe that they are tough, even if the doctors say they might be immunocompromised. And like that's frightening, right? Like if you want to be in denial about these things. And I have these fears and how they come into conflict, and they can create conflict in relationships too.
Right, and then feeling like I don't really have the right to say, well, could you at least carry like in case of emergency card in your wallet or something like that. That feels like kind of an overstep, on my part. So like I said, I just kind of dropped it. But I mean, I don't know what anyone else, would do. I mean, obviously I have no standing. If he was in the hospital, I probably wouldn't be able to see him. I have, no legal relationship with him, I guess I'll put it that way. So, I just putting that out there as far as for Thumb's perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a big fear. And probably, from everybody's side, like what if there's someone that we're never notified?
Right, because then you're like, okay, did this pull back? Is this like what, we hear typically happens, that they just, ghost you for a period of time, or are we just supposed to like guess, or which is this, or? Which my son hasn't done yet, but who knows? I talk to a lot of moms that does happen to. And so anyway, I just on the subject of fear, I thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 people who have raised their hand. So you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment.
Yeah, feel free to do that. Because when I share slides, I'm not able to see all the aspects of Zoom. So I actually can't see your hands raised, and I can only see about 3 faces at a time. So
I'll go. This is Rich. Linda, I really appreciate your comment, and it helped crystallize what I was the sentence I was trying to form. I think for me, and maybe a lot of people, one of the core fears is just a loss of agency. That it's everything is all around us, and we have no power over anything. We're supposed to be wearing masks, but then we read studies that say that masks don't really make any difference. and we have this invisible virus that might attack you at any time, and you might not even know if you have it or if you're passing along and killing it, and ultimately maybe killing other people. When will it end? Did the stock market hit a bottom? Will we have a job? Will there be an income? Is there a huge political shift? Are all the conspiracy theories going to come true? This sense of sitting at home, and even if you're working, it's a whole different world. And this sense that, we used to believe that we're Americans and we have our rights and we get to go out and do things and we all have a voice and our votes matter and all that sort of thing. All of that is being called into question right now, either directly or indirectly because of the virus. And I think that agency, the idea that you have some sort of personal power and some sort of personal choice, is really at the core of our adoption issue. Mm-hmm. Whether you relinquished a child, whether you have adopted someone, or whether you were the person who was relinquished and adopted. Because in many ways, none of us have any say over any of that. And I think it can really trigger all those issues. And we're probably a little more tender about it. So thank you, Linda, for saying what you said, because that helped, that gave me that word, agency.
Mm-hmm. Erica, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, okay, so hi.
Hi, Erica.
Hi. Okay, so basically, and it's really, really quick, I can relate because I on different aspects of the realm, like, I basically, with my biological grandmother, this COVID thing, she's 75, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I went on Amazon, I got all kinds of protective gear, so it's made me a lot of very cautious in trying to help her, and then, the whole fear of everything. But yeah, it's,
I think we lost Erica.
Oh, she got muted somehow. Hang on. I'll unmute her. Yeah, that or we lost her. Well,
she'll be back.
She'll be back, yeah.
okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yay! Okay, so, the whole fear thing, when I first reunited, well, I was 18 years old, just moved out. I was like, I've got to find my mom. I have got to find my mom. Well, I found her all right, but she had already been dead. And just to use that, not dead, but deceased, that's a very strong word, because it hit that strong. And so, I had to accept it, and it took a long time to accept that. And so the fear that kind of comes in to this day, in a sense, is the whole search that I'm trying to do in finding my father. But because I had that personal experience in trying to find my mother and found that, okay, my antennas are like, I'm like, okay, but I still, I had to let it happen on its own, and a lot of times that's easier said than done, especially when you're wanting to do something immediately. But so a lot of us adoptees, like, we're just wanting that closure, in a sense, to where we're wanting to say, okay, this is this is the facial aspects that I have, and I look like this person, and when you don't have that, you're, it's a sense of emptiness. And so, I definitely can relate to that fear factor, but now with my biological grandmother, she's from Cuba, and almost every day I get a call from her apartment complex saying, hey, have you heard from her? And she's out, and, she has to still live. But yeah, this whole COVID-19 thing, it's like, yeah. And she's all I have, in a sense. The rest of my family is in Cuba. bio family. But yeah, you're awesome for doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
She
things.
muted. She muted herself again.
Oh,
Okay. Sorry.
You're okay.
Yeah. So that's just the, yeah. So what do you, in a sense, to someone like myself and like many others on the call, many others in the world, what do you suggest? Because anxiety is there. That's where it all stems from. Anxiety of, I got to do this. I have to prevent this from happening. So what do you suggest most adoptees do in an aspect of wanting to find that other side of the family, paternal? That's what I'm saying, paternal. How do you handle that? How do you get past that fear?
oh, that's so what I'm hearing, and I'm connecting to other stories that I've been working with in the last couple of weeks, but that for whatever reason, there is a disappointment in searching for one part of the family, and it is
Yeah.
fear or that experience and the fear that's created is then holding you back moving forward in your search for the other side of the family. And so, and I find like people get really stuck. I mean, not to say the word stuck, right? But people can get really stuck in that, and I actually don't believe in stuck. I believe we are always processing. It just may look slower than some people realize. Um, but there are things that we would do, like as far as therapeutically, um, in making. Oh, the phone is making noises. My apologies. Um, in making some connections and processing through. So using brain spotting, which is, one of my favorite techniques, is kind of really giving you access to process all of the fear and the negative experience while also giving you the place to process what you hope and what you desire and going between the two. Brain spotting is a lot about using eye positioning and recognizing that where I look affects how I feel. And so you may have a specific spot that you look at that you have more access to one of those feelings, and another spot you look at that you have more access to the other. And so therapeutically, that would be one way that I would help somebody kind of integrate all of that to be able to move forward. And it's, like I said, like that's connecting to several other stories that have come up in the last couple of weeks. It's a big thing, I think, for a lot of people is when search hasn't gone the way you would desire, that continuing the search in a different direction is hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
So we can always, I think all of these things interrelate anyway. But so we can always jump around as people have more things that come up. See if I can. Okay, so the next of the 7 is control. And I think Rich was kind of talking about some of that. Again, these overlap so much in that fear with the loss of agency and that I have no control, right? And I wish I could see like a full gallery so I could see the like raised hands on how many of you think you have control issues or things you feel like you have to control. But when major life decisions were out of your control and things that have shaped you entirely, it makes a lot of sense why you have you have things you want to be in control of something. Maybe not everything, but there's some you want to be in control of something. And we see this from, itty bitty kids through grown-ups. and not that all people don't want some level of control, but I think not just the um, loss of agency from people making up rules and laws and guidelines, but there's also the piece of, I think this has revealed how little control we actually have in this world. Like, I think one of the ways that we as human beings keep ourselves sane is that we convince ourselves we have more control and agency than we actually do. We like to pretend we have power over our lives when, I mean, the truth is, like, a meteor could fall out of the sky at any day. Or suddenly there's murder hornets, which I really thought was an internet joke, but apparently is a real thing. Um, because really, one more thing, like, these things can just pop up. Like, a global pandemic can happen. You know, none of us in November thought we would be quarantined in our house for 6, 8, how many weeks it has been or is going to be. I've even lost count. I do remember the day I started, but I haven't counted the weeks. None of us would have predicted this. And yet, you know, things have changed drastically for us. And some people who they make themselves feel safer by controlling something. Like, I've seen people get worked up because they don't have the brands of cleaning supplies that they usually use. Or, you know, like that's sold out and I have to use this other thing and that's just going to upset me. Or I don't have the exact bottle I use, or, right? But that's how they kept themselves safe, and suddenly, or in their brain, they felt like they were in control of something and they could then deal with other stressors. And now suddenly that's not there. And that was a coping skill or a coping mechanism for them, right? And so we've lost control. We don't get the same bread that we wanted to at the grocery store because somebody else is picking out our groceries, or they're sold out, or all of these things. I mean, so many examples I've seen. But what are the things that are coming up for you and feeling out of control? Who wants to share?
Anybody got their hand?
Quiet tonight.
Yeah.
I know, this group is really quiet. I was like, oh yeah, we'll just lead a discussion. This will be great. Everyone has things to say. When did this group get quiet?
All right, so I guess I'll share something real quick. So you're actually making me realize something. I don't know exactly how it relates to the COVID thing, but I think throughout my life, I've always had people that have tried to control me. And I guess I've had people that have tried to manipulate me my whole life. And I think I've been the master manipulator in a lot of ways, because, you know, they think they're manipulating me, and then I'll just act like I give into it, and when, you know, while they're distracted, I'll just do my own thing anyway. You know, even with my adoption stuff, you know, they never wanted me to find out, and, you know, then I went and found out, and, you know, found everybody. You know, I didn't care. I could care less what they think. So you're making me realize that I think I might have control issues in that aspect where, you know, yeah. So make me think.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we pretend we don't need to control something just so we can control it in the background. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oliver added the serenity prayer helps.
Yeah, recognizing what we can and can't control.
That's good.
And
I have a comment.
change the things that we can control, things that we used to be able to, we can't.
Yeah, I have a comment. I didn't have to raise the hand thing, but I'm raising my hand subconsciously over here in Texas. Literally, I just raised it. automatically. That control aspect, it's just a statement. Sometimes the control that us adoptees have comes from the trauma that we've experienced more than others or less than others. And so I've noticed that I'm a control freak. That's what I call it. I control freak, you know, to where I have to be in control and I have to prevent things from happening, but that can be so overwhelming, and to the point to where, you know, you have to, sometimes I have to really meditate, you know. Meditation really does help me, but there was not only trauma that to be quite honest with you, the trauma was initiated before the adoption took place, but the trauma got extremely worse with my biological, little transparency, not biological, with my adopted family. That's when it really, really, really happened. And so, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, I have to just really let life be life. So yeah, it's, I see someone shaking their head, but yeah, let life be life. And it's, I mean, it's like, oh, you traumatized from your biological, no, the majority of my trauma came directly from my adopted family. You know, I love them to the day, you know, anything happens, I'm right there, you know, trying to make sure they're okay. That's just my character. But the control is something, I mean, this really hits home for me. And just a little transparency, yes, ma'am. Yes.
That's just you can share it or not share it, but notice it, give it some attention. You can come back.
Oh no, I'll share it now. For example, relationships, intimate relationships. You know, I'm actually getting ready to go back into school, and so to prevent myself from being hurt, I'm no longer in a relationship, but I find myself trying to control my own life to prevent myself from getting hurt, getting, you know, that reliving that pain that happened. And so rather than really developing a resilience, to where I have to really be able to say, hey, this is not that. Because if I take this into that, then that will become this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's, oh my gosh, like.
You can control it. You're just trying to think of every little path, aren't you?
Heck, I'm trying to control something right now. But it's just, you know, that's why I say meditation is something that has really helped me be able to handle certain situations, family, relationships, you know. So, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, meditation's a great thing to do, and certainly can help you feel a little more centered in the now and less in the like thinking about all the contingency plans.
Yeah, and being a therapist, getting ready to take my LPC exam, and having to understand myself and understand the clients that I'm going to be serving. So they say a clinician is only as smart as their clients is only as smart as the clinician is willing to go. How far yeah. So it's cool. Yeah. So yes, ma'am. Touche. So I have to be. I've developed that way of knowing. Okay, Erica, what would you tell your client? You know. So. I'm done again.
Control your client's process. Sometimes they don't make the progress you think they need to be making, right?
Yeah.
And we can only lead people to healing that we have found ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so while you don't have to live through every trauma that your clients will live through, you have to know how to find that resilience in yourself. Right.
See, Rich has his hand up. Rich, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, one thought on this. I think it's easy in the world of control to think in terms of all or nothing. That we're either a control freak or we're totally powerless. And it helps me to realize that even though I don't have control over anything, I do have the power to influence things. And in however small my circle is, I might have influence. If it's with an encouraging post on Facebook, if it's with a kind comment to someone, if it's with maybe a not so kind comment, if it's warranted. And so that's something I've been thinking about is where might I be able to influence an outcome even though I know I can't control it. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as some middle ground, that it's not a choice between control or utter powerlessness, but we do have agency, we do have influence.
And, I think one of the most important things that we do have is control of our thoughts, because our thoughts drive our behavior. So we do have control of that.
Most days.
Most days.
With practice. Yes.
Yep. Your thoughts and your feelings you can control.
Also, Eric, great to see you on here, buddy. Great to see your face.
I might be on mute. No, I'm not on mute. Hi, Rich. Nice to see you. Yeah, I had a little, I use Zoom every day and somehow I could not get on this, so I'm sorry I'm coming in here late. So there are a few new faces. And I'm sorry, I'm only catching up to the conversation. Do you want me to introduce myself? I probably met a bunch of you a couple years ago at the Indiana conference, but I don't know 100%.
Sure, go right ahead.
So Rich and I I go back to 2013. I was at a American Adoption Conference, AAC conference, and I had been sent there by a therapist who thought it would be good for me. And Rich is laughing because he knows how this went. And probably many of you have had this experience if you've been to a place where all of the people have the same story, but you didn't know it when you walked in the room. That was kind of that's the punchline to the whole thing. So I had only, and I'm not going to get into my story. My story's got a nice ending so far, but I went in kind of searching for, people who knew the language of not so much trauma, but feeling lost and feeling disconnected from my adopted family, which is a lovely family. I think someone was talking about that a few minutes ago. They're wonderful people, but there were some real disconnects and they had really grown through some issues with relationships I'd had. So I went to this conference and I literally walked into the room, the first room of the night, which I think was a dinner or kind of a reception, and was just so completely blown away by the fact that everyone was going through basically the same thing at different phases. It was all the same deep things that were problems for them were the same things for everyone. So I basically spent 3 days crying and trying to learn how to breathe again. Like that really was the advice that was given to me by many of the veterans at this conference, including Rich. So there was a men's group there. The men's group specifically was, I got connected to a bunch of really cool men. Rich and I have kind of I love Denver, so I've ended up in Denver a few times and so I have some friends there. So that's kind of my history with this do you want to call it, this experience in groups like this. And I found them to be really just kind of, you know, soothing and also really helpful when I don't feel like I have, you know, full control over my, you know, what's going on. You know, and it's, if I have to comment on control, I will say that I don't tend to entirely agree with, I think, I want to say Melanie. I don't feel like I have control over my thoughts and feelings a fair amount of the time. I would love to, I feel like those run rampant and kind of spin around me when something specific happens or something really gets under my skin. So yeah, the strategies for dealing with that are, you know, numerous, but I don't feel like I have full control over those a lot of the time. And a lot of that stuff is triggered by relationship things. So just to add that to the conversation that was already going on. So, so that's, yeah, I don't know what kind of introduction that sounds like, but it sound a little unhinged. But so yeah, that's how I come into this. I love being around other folks who are part of this community because it always feels connective. So I'll leave it there for now, I think.
Great. Thank you for sharing
Mm.
and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next issue. As I said, they all kind of overlap in some ways. But loss and grief. Whoa! Whoa, did you guys see me just lose the computer?
Ooh.
Got it. Sorry, there's a couple chords here. All right. Oh, and I hit it backwards. Let's see if I can. There we go. Loss and grief. So like we were talking about with fear is if you have had major life experiences with loss and grief, then every subsequent experience with loss and grief is going to be magnified. Right. And I used to explain this when I did adoption preparation education. I would explain this to these parents that your child has suffered such a loss that when, you know, that little boy breaks up with your girl in second grade, like it's devastating and more devastating than you imagine because they just feel like, well, they don't want me and my birth mother didn't want me and you don't really want me and all of that, right, is so real and so huge in that moment. There are certain losses that cannot be processed as a child, right? And so they sit in you and the other things add up. And so, as we've had fear about what we could lose, there are things that we have lost in this. And there are things that we are grieving. So, I don't need to keep talking too much, but if there's things you have, do you want to share about things you've lost, grieving, how hopefully some of you are getting better at grieving because you've practiced it? Um, you know, but it takes, like, you have to go back and grieve those old losses, which is not fun. It's what people would like to not do, but sorry, therapist isn't gonna let you off the hook.
I can share on that. I'm Meredith. So right now, it was actually last Friday with my therapist. I did a virtual therapy funeral for representing my relationship with my mother, my birth mother, and how I thought of it, because I used to think of her as being able to give me what I need, and she wasn't able to do that. And accepting that loss and that sadness about it, I had a little shoebox. I had to write in the words of what you know, I just said, and I put it with black tissue paper and folded it up, and so now this Mother's Day is coming up, and the way that I'm going to honor that and represent like a new beginning, but also some grief still, to let those two things exist at the same time, is I'm going to go to my Jewish grandmother's grave site on Mother's Day and put a stone there on her gravesite, because that's how Jewish people in their religion, they put a stone there instead of flowers, and they say that that's because the stone is forever, and it represents that your love for that person is forever, and it shows that you were there to remember them. And so this will be something new for me, but at the same time, I'm going to be feeling a lot of sadness that my mom couldn't be who I needed her to be for me, and that I'm not in contact with her right now. And that whole part of me that believed that that was a possible reality, I'm letting go of that, and that's a huge loss and grief too. So I'm really in some intense emotions in that area this weekend, especially. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that also brings up the idea that sometimes we have to create our own rituals because we weren't at a funeral because we, found them too late, or for a variety of other reasons, relationship reasons. Um, and that's going to be an added thing with all of this, is that we can't have funerals right now, or very, very small funerals. I think the rules are currently like 10 people. And so just recognizing, like, when we don't have the typical rituals that help walk us through grieving, that we have to work harder at doing it ourselves. So Anne just shared in the chat that that her dad's funeral was limited to 10 people, but they were able to stream it live, which is wonderful. I heard about a drive-by funeral, like instead of like calling or a wake, or right, that they'd it was a very small town, clearly, that they would get this approved, right? But they had cars do like a drive-by and like talk out the window, like, the person was so wonderful. We're thinking about you. So there are ways that we can get creative with it too.
See, Brooke, I kind of take the opposite approach. I just don't acknowledge loss and grief. I think I've had so much of it. I'm an adoptee and I'm a mother that lost a son to adoption, but I just expect people to leave. I'm not shocked by when somebody leaves. And I just recently lost my father, and I'm in Florida taking care of him, and Pam and Marcie and I are, on the phone planning the conference and everything that was supposed to happen. And, they would always check in on me and see how you're doing. And I'm like, I'm busy taking care of him. I'll cry about it later. He's been gone now 2 months. I still haven't cried. I don't cry about it. I mean, I miss my dad. I love my dad, but I don't feel emotions. I think I just got so good at just like shoving them down, and I have very low expectations of people. So.
Mm-hmm. And there comes a point where we disassociate from those kinds of emotions so that we can keep going. Yeah. And when the loss has been so big, and if you start to grieve them, you're afraid you're going to have to open up all the other losses from the past. Yeah. Like, it makes sense, right? And I like to tell stories on myself, so like I'm not telling stories on anybody else, right? And so this is You know, when 9/11 happened, I remember walking around going like, why are these people so upset? Right? But you put that in the place of for, I think it was 9 months prior to that, I'd had a funeral, at least one funeral every month. And I was done. Like, I was done the month before that. And so 9/11 happened, and I was like, well, that's scary, but we don't know what's going to happen next. Like, I mean, just like blank, right? And old enough. I know I look a lot younger than I am, but certainly old enough to know better. Um, and so that's just a way we disassociate from our emotions. But that doesn't mean that they're not still there somewhere, buried deeply, and could pop up at another time. Just a warning.
I'll probably have a massive meltdown someday. So if you see me like go off on something, you know, oh yeah, Jennifer's got a lot of grief she's got to process today.
It will be fine.
Jennifer, it'll be some weird song, or you'll see a puppy walking down the street, or something strange triggers it, and you'll go, "Why am I crying?"
Yeah. I figured it's probably going to be going to the lake, which was my grandparents' place, which is where I always took care of my dad during the summers. It's the only place left that's been constant throughout my whole life. And when I go there this weekend and my dad's not there.
Yep. Yep.
And then I'll have to go for a long walk.
Just let your just
Yep,
let it
exactly.
just the feeling. Don't push it away.
Yeah.
I liked someone was mentioning about kind of creating your own rituals before, and I lost my adoptive mother, so basically my mother, back in July, and I was there were a lot of different emotions attached to it, but I didn't feel like I was grieving enough. That's a strange statement, I think, but I we had all the normal things and big family events and so forth. So I had every opportunity to, lose it and really feel deeply connected to the loss, but I really didn't. And a weird opportunity came up in December of this past year, which was kind of an art event with a bunch of different people who had different ideas about how to do something. And we ended up doing this weird piano burning ritual. And for me, the reason I play the piano is because my mother wanted me to play the piano. She wanted a little boy who played the piano. And so I did. And so I thought, and I had this piano sitting in storage, and I hold on to way, 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 way too many things. That's another whole, that may in fact be an entire conversation. But I had at a certain point collected many, many pianos, was giving them away, finding new things to do with them, giving them to artists who could turn them into something else. I had one left, couldn't get rid of it, couldn't figure out what to do with it. The event came up, and I turned that event for myself into a kind of a send off to my mother. So I actually ended up putting some of her ashes in a burning piano as in the middle of on December 20th. And that really felt like a real thing. But we go back to the last slide of control, and it actually really gave me a sense of like I had a real personal, it was personally meaningful to me. It wasn't a thing that I showed up to. It wasn't a thing I had to do. It was completely, it just, it evolved. And so it became really a powerful vehicle for me to feel both connected to her and to let her go at the same time. I'm not sure how to explain that, but it's, so I don't know, Jennifer, I think maybe when you go to you should be prepared when you go to the lake to feel it, but maybe one way to buffer what is going to be a sad time is to create a little, a little temple or a little experience that is that you love about your dad that you can share, and that may make it both palatable and actually you'll go back there and love that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, and Eric, I wonder if desire to hold on to things is related to feeling, and I don't want to lose anything else. And I want to have memories of everything.
Well, honestly, that feels like a giant conversation for me. I mean, I'm doing a video on ecological intelligence for a project, and I walked into my living room the other day, and I had this moment where I was like, yeah, I may talk about having this this sense of nature and ecological, intelligence, but here I am hoarding all this shit. And I know the stories of all the stuff, and I think you're right. I hold on to these things because they're part of my story. And I do. I think you're right. Subconsciously, I do think I don't want to let go of things because I've had to do that subconsciously, unconsciously. But yeah, that's hoarding is probably. I hope the hoarding has not come up on these slides, but sure, I'm happy to come back in if we get there.
No, hoarding is not one of the core issues, but recognizing that it can be related to loss and it cannot be related to, as you were saying, identity. And this is part of my story.
Right.
And who am I? And I'm not
Right.
sure who I am. And so I have all these things to help me know.
Right. Yeah. That's a good insight. Frightening insight, but good insight.
Yeah.
I still do own one piano, by the way, but I play that one. I didn't burn that one.
You should have a piano.
I should have a piano. I will always have a piano. Yep.
So guilt and shame. These are big ones. All right. And there's some guilt and shame, and I must be bad if this thing that created adoption happened in my life. I must be bad. Right? That's just like I would say at least 90% of people impacted by adoption have some level of that. Probably more, but we'll be conservative on that one. And I think that comes up even as Rich had mentioned earlier on, am I making somebody sick and don't know it? Right? Well, I had a fever for like 6 hours, but that was before all of this. But could I have had it? And could I have spread it? And am I responsible for somebody dying? Right? Like we can spin that out real fast. So that's just one way that can be impacted by the current situation, especially if you tend to carry those things. What do you guys want to say about guilt and shame? And as you think about that, I will clarify. The appropriate definition for guilt is that I did something bad. And the appropriate definition of shame is that I am bad and that none of us are bad. Okay? There may be good dogs, but there are no bad children. We are not bad people unless we, right? Like, so you not to carry the shame. That shame is something that we put on ourselves or we put on other people. And guilt is a self-imposed emotion meant to signal us that we've crossed our own moral boundaries. But the feelings get all lumped together as we talk about this. Yeah. Surprise, people don't want to talk about guilt and shame. That's okay.
I'll talk. Briefly, it's a huge struggle for us, and the moral issues around how you were conceived, and the guilt and shame ties in, I think, with lovability too. That somehow, if you were born out of wedlock, you were inherently less lovable or less wantable, and that's a really painful place to live if you adopt that belief system. And a lot of kids, even kids not touched by adoption, but children of divorce, walk through life believing that that the divorce was somehow their fault, that if they had been a better child, their parents could have stayed together. And in our baby brain, I think we tend to take that on. It's not a rational thing, but for me, one thing that I have had to do and I have to revisit periodically is one, and this sounds weird, but take it in a healthy way, forgive myself for being born. It's not a rational statement, but it's like, if I, once I learned the story of my birth parents, they both died before I even got out of high school. And ultimately, I really think that the pregnancy and their broken relationship, they really loved each other, but my birth had a lot to do with the destruction of their relationship, and for sure my birth mother's ultimate destruction of herself. And there's a piece of me that said, wow, if I hadn't been born, they might be living happily ever after. And I had nothing to do with that. I had no will in that. I had no role in that. But it's almost like survivor guilt after an accident. You know, the plane crashes and everybody dies but you.
Yeah.
And looking at that, there's a piece of me that said, wait, I have to, one, I got to forgive myself for being born. And two, I have to be okay with asserting my space here, with asserting my right to be here. One of the guys in our group, Jeff, who was the subject of a court case that opened records in Colorado from 51 to 67. And he's not a religious guy at all, but we were talking one day and he said, you know, one thing my mom told me that really helped me was people decide when to have sex, God decides when to make a life. I said, huh, that's an interesting perspective. And being able to come to terms with all the complications around that my birth doesn't make me responsible for the circumstances that led up to it. And it doesn't impact my ability as a human being to have relationships with other people or all that kind of thing. And narrowing all that down is a huge challenge. And in some ways it never stops. But those are some thoughts for me anyway around guilt and shame. I don't know what other people think about that.
Great, Rich. Thank you for sharing. I want to just quickly hop in here real quick and remind everyone, we are on a time limit. The Zoom room locks us off at 8:30. So I always hate to do this when we get into a deep conversation. So we're not going to be able to finish. Brooke, can you forward this to us so we can get the information out to our attendees for the rest of it? Is that something you can do for us? That would be great.
What intimacy, rejection and abandonment.
The 7 core. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What they are, so you can think about them, and I will forward you guys that, and feel free to send me your questions if you have them. I'm pretty accessible.
We appreciate that. And thank you so much, Brooke. Now, before we sign off this evening, we always want to talk about next week's spotlight guest as well. Jennifer, can you put the next slide up before we close? Oh boy, we've got Suzanne and Bob joining us on the 15th. Suzanne, you're still with us? Can you unmute?
Hi.
Hi. We're excited to have you and Bob next week.
We're excited to come. And thank you, Brooke, for such an amazing presentation tonight.
It's great. Great. Let's see, we've got 3 minutes. If anybody wants to, Suzanne, if you'd like to add anything about next week real quick, or any final comments.
Next week, we're doing a reading with 2 amazing actresses, Haley Palmer and Kat Nardizzi, and they're reading my first ever adoption play, which probably hits all 7 of Brooke's facets.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to it. So Okay, anybody for any last comments? No? Okay, well, thanks again, Brooke. We really appreciate your presentation this evening. Thanks everybody for attending as always. It's so important to have you here. We love each and every one of you, and mark your calendars for next Friday night. We'll be with Suzanne and Bob and her gang. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
See ya.